My name is Martin Mattert with the Witness to War Foundation. It is October 10th, 2016, and we are at our office in Peachtree Corners, Georgia. I'm sitting with Mr. Harry McMahon, M lowercase c, capital M-A-H-O-N, who served in the Pacific Theater of World War II in the United States Marine Corps in the 2nd Marine Division, 1st Marine Battalion, 6th Marine Regiment. How are you doing today, Harry?
I'm fine. I'm very good.
It's a real honor and pleasure to be here with you today. Thanks so much for joining me. My first question is, where are you from originally?
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, small little town down the Ohio River, Avalon. Joined the Marine Corps December 1942. And
well, let's talk back. I want to hear a little bit about your family and what was like growing up out there.
Well, I was born there. My father died when I was 12. He'd been in World War I, and he'd sat me on his lap a couple of times, and I remember him going through the books of World War I, and he said, "These are the real fighters, the best men. They train better, they fight better. They won the war for us." And I said, "I want to be one, and I would like to be one." They were very good. It turned out I was very tall and very thin, and I was not muscular and well built. So my chances of getting in there were slim. And I tried. The war came naturally in December of 41. I graduated from high school in September of 41, or June of 41, and had a job with my father's old company. And he had died when I was 12. And
what was the job?
The purchasing department of the Coppers Company. And so I was in as a young draftsman to help the drafting department and the engineering department. So I knew, they knew my father, but when the war came and we were all tried, I wanted to be a Marine, and I tried, and I did not fail the test because my chest was a half-inch smaller than my body, and I had to build it up. I tried like the devil to build it up with a rowing machine, and I ripped every bone in my abdomen trying to do it. So I was pretty disappointed. And about 2 months later, one of the ladies in my office, my little office in the Coppers Company, said, "Harry, are you serious about this Marine Corps?" I said, "Yes, I am. Why?" She said, "Well, my son-in-law is the examining doctor over at the recruiting station for the Marines. Would you like me to call him?" I said, "You call him right away." And I went over at noon. And she described me to her son-in-law, a Navy officer, and he came out of the second floor steps looking down over a huge crowd of people trying to get in service or leaving the service. And he looked over, and he spotted me, and he said, "Are you McMahon?" And I said, "Yes." But the story is, in the end, we went through the physical, everything, and he brought me back in, and he said, "Harry, everything you got is good, but you ain't got enough of it." But he says, "I tell you, I'm going to pass you. You got another physical to take at Parris Island, but as far as I'm concerned, you're in." I went home, told my mother, "Don't say a word to anybody. Wait till I get back from get to Parris Island, because I might flunk the physical down there. I'm not built enough for that." When I tell you, I got down to Parris Island in December of 42, it was like running cattle through a barn. You were cattle. You were moving through it fast. The second day down there, we went through all this heart blessed and everything. And I got down to the end of one line. I said to this one Marine, this Navy guy, right? And I said, "Is this the end of the physical?" And he says, "Yes, move on, chicken." And I moved on. I'm very happy because I'd gotten past the physical. So yes, I was a Marine. And I then went through Parris Island. And yes, every Marine in this world knows what Parris Island is, or San Diego. And yes, I looked at the sky many times and wondered, is this still America? And yes, I was very, very scared, beat up, and felt like nothing.
Any instructors stand out in your mind from your time at Parris Island?
Sergeant Ego, and he was tough and dirty. But when we got finished, he shook my hand and said, "Hello, Marine." And they always say at the end, "Semper Fi." So I knew he approved of me and he liked me. So I came out of there. We were shipped to San Diego, or went to ship to Camp Lejeune, and I went to 14th Marines. It was an artillery outfit. I thought, well, that's pretty good. I'm behind the lines that far in artillery, and we were back there training for that. We were training for everything, and at that time, they needed some people in the commissary, and he said, would you like to that? And I said, take anything you got, but I'd like the 14th. So we stayed there. We trained in then we went to the West Coast. On our way home to get over, we were the 4th Division, and we were heading for combat in the Pacific. And we got out there to the West Coast, and we trained for 3 to 4 months in the desert, and it was not easy. I had my first drunken problem out in the Mojave Desert, but it was fine. The unfortunate thing is they were ready to go, and the word came that they needed a corps of 400 to 500 more Marines to start the 5th Division. They were bringing in old Marines that had been on the canal and old Marines that had been elsewhere, and were making up a 5th Division. I was one of the 400 or 500 that moved from the 4th Division to the nucleus of the 5th Division. And things were moving well. I was in the camp in a different section now because I was in the 5th Division. I had the pleasure of meeting Bastrone, who joined us. He was the War of Honor. I had the chance to meet him one day. He was just coming over to start a new life with the 5th Division. And then they needed people down, they started to bring back more people, and they needed a Camp Elliott down by San Diego. They set up Camp Elliott, and I was informed by 3 or 4 other, quite a few other people. I don't know how many went down, but we all went down to be permanent personnel at Camp Elliott. And I was then told by some second lieutenant, when we got down there, we were standing in this group by the attention. He came down and he said, young man, you're going to be over in the officers club, and you're going to be in charge of the helping the things over there. You're at that time I was PFC, but I was up for, and I'd been there then. I'd been 7 or 8 months in the Marine Corps, 8 months. Well, I stayed there, and I became associated with him, and I had the pleasure of meeting the new officers that they came in to go over, and meeting the old ones coming back from the canal and Pacific. It was that reason that I was there, and basically it was January of '44. I'd been all through 1943 in East Coast, the West Coast, and in early '44, I walked as Colonel McMahon, and I said I'd take turn and talk to him at service, and got his waiter, and I said, your name is very similar to mine. He's McMahon. And we got to be talking the next week, and finally I told him, I said, sir, I want out of here. This is not what I came in for. I want to be in combat, and I was in artillery, and I got into this because they needed somebody in the 5th Division. And now I'm down here. And he said, I was then corporal, and he said, Corporal, next Thursday I'm having dinner with General Vanderbilt. He's on his way back to Quantico to become Commandant of the Marine Corps. And he said, make eye contact with me, and I will introduce you to the General and tell him what you want. I said, me? Tell him what I want? He says, he'll listen. He'll listen. You know, he's right. He did. Next Thursday evening, there were 6 or 7 of these officers. This man, McMahon, was a full colonel. And incidentally, he went on to become governor of Arkansas. And he was a full colonel, and he was sitting next to General Vanderbilt. And so he just said, General, this is a young man I've known here and met. I like him. He'd like to have a few words with you. And the general looked at me and said, what do you want? And I said, I want to go to combat. I want out of here. This is not what I want. He says, you're crazy as hell. And I said, no, I'm not. He says, it's bad out there. You can get killed. And he said, it's bad. And I said, I don't care. This is what I want. And he said, what have you done? And I told him. And he said, all right, if you want to go, I'm going to send you to a damn good division with a damn good regiment. And he said, I'll mark it down that way. I said, thank you, sir. That's the last I saw or heard of General Vanderbilt. But about 10 days later, some first sergeant walked into the base, Firmest base there and said, who the hell is McMahon? And I said, me. And he says, what'd you do wrong? I said, what do you mean? He says, you're going to combat. Instant right. I said, great. And when I got on the ship to go overseas, it was till the end, near the end, we got to Maui. And I got the word, I got paroled into Maui. You and 2 or 3 other guys are going to 1-6. I said, well, that's good. Who the hell is 1-6? Well, I found out very quickly. 2nd Division, 1st Battalion, 6th Marines. They had made a name for themselves in the canal with Colonel Jones, and they made a big name for themselves on Tarawa. They were the ones that on the 2nd day went in and literally beat the shit out of the Japs and went right straight across, and lost a lot of them, and a lot of them. And I found out later, a lot of them that were living, I met every one of them and I knew them, those guys. So I had the pleasure of knowing that, but I knew that I had some good guys. And when we were heading for Saipan, go ahead.
Before we get too far, I do want to ask about the guys that were coming back in 43. You said you were working with 50.
I was over in the West Coast all 43.
And you said there were some guys coming back. What were they like? Did you interact with them at all?
They were wounded, quiet, and glad to be out the hell out of it. And the officers said it was hell. And I knew that it was, and they were told me that, but I also, this is what I'd come in for. I trained to be one, I wanted to be one, and I had the confidence that I could be one if I got the chance. And believe me, it worked out wonderful. So it was good. The trip out to Saipan was very memorable because the seas were tough, the weather was tough, and we were told we were heading out to replace. We would go right into combat at Saipan and join our battalions, and everybody on the ship knew then what outfit they were going to. And as we got off, there were groups, and it was, I can tell you, I was, yes, very scared because I got off, and everybody in the shore, they'd been there 15 days. They went in on June 15th, and I got there on June 26th or 7th or 8th, and they had gone through, 1-6 had hit the beach right there. They got the shit kicked out of them they lost a lot on the first 2 or 3 days. Then they got the blunt of the tank attack on the 5th day. And naturally we were at sea then, didn't know it, but they lost a lot of men, and that's why when I joined them, they said, you had some records, you were in the officers club, you were doing this, you were running the mess, all that. I said, yes. He says, get in commissary, you're running, you're going to be in there, and the first 2 guys I met in there had been on Tarawa, and machine gunner and machine gun helper, and they were told to get in, to start taking rations and that because we had lost so many cooks. They lost an awful lot of communication guys. And on the tank attack, I can tell you, later on, I met the guys that were there. We had talks for the rest of the war. I was with 1-6. From June of 44 until December of 45, I was with 1-6,
Now, on Saipan, they lost a lot of their commanders.
They
right?
lost a lot of commanders.
Who was in charge when you got there?
I was in charge, Colonel Willie K. Jones, and the days in Ufit, when my first day there, they took my sack and put it away, and then I was on the line, and I turned to the first two guys. I said, "Is this your first combat?" And they laughed, and the one guy yelled, he wants to fight. This is our first combat. And I said, "What is it?" He says, "Slim, it's our third combat." I said, "You were on the canal?" He said, "Yeah." "We were on Tarawa?" "Yeah." I said, I said, "You guys are heroes. You're the guys that we all meant to the girls that were all, we picked up girls because they were all Marine, we were Marines. You guys were winning the damn war." And they were guys that had gone through Saipan. They were on Saipan. They'd gone through both the canal and Tarawa, and they were it was the toughest one. They had just gone through the tank attack when I joined them. Well, let's put it this way. The tank attack was on the fourth or fifth day. 20 tanks came down, and I heard the stories from them because I naturally wasn't there. And I can tell you, there's a kid. He's my height and about my weight, from last name was Thurston, and I can't remember his nickname, as we all knew, and I can't. But he told me that one of the days, long after that, when we were talking, my real name, Harry, is Marion, and he was from Minnesota. And I said, "The tank attack?" He said, "It was all rained, and there had been the monsoons, and the tanks would make rig dig dips and what." And he said, "We got down in those tanks, and the tanks went right over us. And when we come up the other side, we shot the shit out of them." And I said, "Really, Thurston?" He said, "Yeah." So I learned a lot about what happened in the tank. But then the next thing was, I still was not in the 1-6 yet, when you read in the history, and I'm sure other people that have talked to you over the last years and years, this is the first time the Marine Corps put in the 2nd Division and the 4th Division on both sides of Saipan, and in the center was the United States Army Reserves from New York State, called the Swimming 27th. Those son of a bitches were yellow, dirty, and untrained, didn't know a thing. I felt so sorry for them. We didn't know all that when we went in, but they were there. They had a 3-star general. It's all in the record. And he was the commander for the whole island. And his last name was Smith, and he was a general for the Army. And about halfway up the island, I can't remember the date, but it was the date when he said he needed more reinforcements, he needed more artillery, he needed more equipment, and he was holding the line. They held the line for 3 days, and our General Howland Smith held bad with the admirals, with the general, everything. And finally, on the 3rd day, they did get the word that maybe he would be relieved and our man would take over the whole island, and we moved. You cannot stop once you start battle. Every Marine knows it. You keep going. You never stop. You keep going. And the Army stopped us, and 3 days, and the Nips are not dumb, and so they banzaied, and 200 or 300 banzaied, and I was 1 day or 2 before I got I was not there on the 1-6 then. I was still about to come into Saipan and join them when the Army, the 27th Division was banzaied. They had taken their line. I learned all this from firsthand, but when they banzaied on them, there were 200 or 300 of them ran down. They were all armed, and they yelling. I've been through a one banzai, so I know. They banzaied them, and they kept running right out. They killed, and most of the Army officers got up and ran. They were built. They had their line. Our line was like this. Their line was like this, and the center of that, their officers turned around and ran. When they ran, a lot of the men ran. The men that stayed got killed, and got very, and then some hid. And I'm telling you, they went right straight back. It was this the 10th Marines of the 2nd Division, artillery, 75 millimeter Hausers, right behind them, back there about a quarter of a mile, and they dropped their Hausers. They dropped their 45 millimeter Hausers to fire 1-second fuses, and they stopped the line, and they had hand-to-hand, and they used small arms, and they stopped those nips at the artillery. And we were invited back about 8 years ago. We were called, we were sent letters by the 2nd Division to come back and tell the NCOs and the officers what happened on Saipan, firsthand, and we went back. I told them I was not there during the attack. I joined them about 2 or 3 days later, and then I heard stories for the next year about it, and they were firsthand. The guys had been there and done that, so it was like, and it was a shame. We lost a lot of good Americans because they didn't have leadership, they didn't have morale, they didn't have discipline. They just got up and ran, and the guys that stayed either were killed or not. But it was an interesting story. One of the guys that went down, incidentally, 1-6 was on the mountain beside the hill on this next where the banzai was. They were told the next morning to retake it. They went down to retake it, and when they retook it, out from a few of the woods came 3 Army soldiers, and they had weapons on them, and they were going to kill them because they said, "You guys left us up here last night, you yellow sons of bitches," and so forth like that. And they had to prove they were Marines, not soldiers. And then those guys didn't want to go back. They would refuse to go back to their own outfit. And they actually were put on a Marine truck and taken over to our base on Saipan. And I can assure you later, they said they were sent back. I wonder if the media ever got a hold of those 3 guys. But they hated their own outfit because they claimed they got up and ran, and they hid though. And so it was that. Well, I joined them after that, and we went on into Saipan up. It was out of Mount Chapachal was right beside Mount Chapachal when I joined them. The 29th Marines were told, the whole division of the 29th Marines were told they were the responsibility of taking the Chapachal, and those poor bastards had a tough job taking that mountain. But they took the mountain over. We went ahead, the 2nd Division up one side, 4th Division up the other. We went up, and we went up towards the cliffs. And yes, we killed a lot of nips on the way up, and we every day we were moving. We got down to the end, and we did not go up into the cliff to get them. So we came back because we were told we had to go to Tinian. We went down, and one day, I'd been there then about, I'd say 5 to 6 for close to a week, and we were told we were going to Tinian. And then that's where I really saw it all and I got hit in Tinian, and I
wanted to hear a little bit more about Saipan, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Taking that hill, what was the elevation like? How steep was that mountain?
Mount Chapachal?
Uh-huh.
I'm going to say 6,000 or 7,000 feet. It was big, and it was right in the center of the island. Saipan is 5 miles wide, 15 miles long, and halfway up the island is Chapachal. And it's basically, well, it's buried in the middle, but we went on the right side of it, and the 4th Division was over here. And the 29th came in. I don't know whether the 29th was a oversized, but it was a hell of a lot of people in the 29th. And their sole job was to take Mount Chapachal, so we moved on. And it was tough walking, tough fighting. It was all coral, and it was not smooth, and it had been used. It was density. There were a lot of nips and a lot of people there, and a lot of civilians. Yes, we killed some civilians. Yes, we killed a lot of nips, and yes, we had sick bay with us, and we had corpsmen. But I was learning that they do one hell of a job. And this is what I really picked up those 5-6 days that I was on Saipan, getting to the end. And we did go faster to the end. And then I will come back and tell you a little of why, but we then went over and we would get down to the water, and it was a 3-hour trip. We're just across the river, 3 miles, but we went over this, and that was D-Day, and the D-Day on Tinian. Tinian is an island, basically, today it's a beautiful island. It's level, basically level, except the cliffs at the far end. And they were memorable. There's a bunch of cliffs there, and there's a couple out here to the center. And when we got there, I was a rookie when it comes to going in D-Days. And I was on this landing ship going in, and I was scared. And I said, the first thing I said to the guys around me, what in the hell stinks? I could smell this odor. What in the hell stinks? And the guy next to me said, human bodies. I said, really? It's the first time we were 50 yards off the beach, and the stink was terrible. And he said, human bodies. I hope most of them were nips. But the Navy, the artillery, and then we had lunch, and the 4th had landed in the morning, and they had picked 2 spots, a white beach and they call it a black or red beach. That was right in white beach was only 85 yards wide, and the other end was shorter. They couldn't find, but it was 4th Division had made a fake landing on Tinian City early in the morning, and around then they came around and they went ashore at 7 or 8, and they went ashore up here, and they went up to the right.